Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and I'd like to thank you for joining me, for giving me a little bit of your time as we chop up the latest in news. Also, I want to inform people that we will be having some Patreon streams this week, and we will be having some channel member streams this week if StreamYard and YouTube does not stop us from doing it, okay? We have everything set up for it. All we have to do is set a time and date. If they're not blocking, we will be doing that. Now, thank you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, anywhere on God's green earth. If you hear a lot of noise in the background, that is a fan. I told you we're doing some renovations, so we have a fan blowing out some stuff. So you have to please excuse me. I want to thank each and every one of you who are joining me on Twitch, Twitter, Locals, Rumble, Odyssey, the Red Pill Journal, the Red Pill Diaries, and anywhere else that you can get us. All right. So let's get into it. I see everybody in the chat. Let me give a couple shout outs first. My guy Joel is in the building. Joel Bradford. Let's see. Man, this thing is starting to act up already. Flying Crocodile 46 is in the building. Also, Net Rando. What's up? He's in the building also. Let's go into this stuff because there's a lot going on right now. All right. And I'm going to be going from talking about the news to engaging with the chat to also just engaging with the wider audience. Okay. And if I can, before we go right into it, can I ask you, would you please hit the like button and please subscribe? Give me about 15 and 20 more subscribers, which would match the subscribers that I've lost over the last day or so. I would really appreciate that. You'll see me blurred in and blurred out because this program right here is where people were telling me, hey, why are you using the green screen? So I stopped using the green screen a little bit and blur out the background because there's a lot going on back here. All right, a lot going on. So the news. Congress voted on and approved a bill that has gone to Joe Biden's desk. This bill is very important. Most people who are looking at the bill are looking at it for provisions for Ukraine, for Israel, and for Taiwan or Chinese Taipei. Those are all good areas to look at this bill for. Also, the main thing is what's on Joe Biden's desk is the strong arming of TikTok. You understand? And let me talk to you a bit about this. Man, I'm telling you, I hate this blur thing doing this. But anyway, the way the United States dominates the globe militarily is due to her dollar being accepted, right? Not as the global currency anymore, but it still has the lead. It still occupies a majority of currency transactions. So it is still the main vehicle for trade and commerce, okay? But here it is. Propaganda is one of the main tools that is used to divide and conquer nations, governments, and peoples around the globe. And America and the West had a monopoly on this, right? And they feel challenged by a non-white, non-Western nation having the most popular social media platform on the planet. You know, when Donald Trump was in office and he started this war against the Chinese by attacking, before it was Huawei, it was another phone company. I cannot think of that phone. I should have done my research before, but it was another phone company out of China, and he pretty much bankrupted that phone company. So what he did afterwards, and you see the shadow cast, my hat is actually even, but it's a shadow by the light being cast on that shows my hat is kind of twisted, but it's not. This company, it bankrupted him, I believe, and you haven't heard much from it. And then he went and tried to blackmail the Chinese on TikTok about TikTok. And he wanted concessions trade-wise to not go against or to not wage war against economic war against TikTok. The Chinese weren't going for it, so then they pushed forward this economic war against the Chinese. And one of the main reasons for this is because of that. Remember the report, the Pentagon report I told you, where they said that they had between 12 months to 18 months, something like that, 6 to 18 months or something like that. I can't remember the exact number of months to challenge China's rise. Because even though all of the war game scenarios showed that the United States would lose a war and lose it even more quickly each time around. And the only way the United States did not become quickly overcome and defeated is because when they employed advanced weaponry that they don't have, weapons that are not even on the drawing board. And when they came to the conclusion that, hey, man, maybe if we can stoke tensions, maybe if we can divide people, maybe if we can undercut stability in the Asia Pacific, we can undermine the rise of China. And so you saw this flurry of U.S. leaders, U.S. emissaries go to Asia. You even saw Yellen and Blinken over in China multiple times and in Asia multiple times. And now you're seeing Blinken over in China. But before he left, what did he say? Blinken said he would demand that China cease aiding Russia and cease doing trade. Do you understand the magnitude of what this man is saying? I'm asking you all because when you look at what he's saying and when you look at what is going on in the world today, you cannot help but see imperial hubris and some racism up in there. Now, I talk about this all the time, and I haven't lost my focus on the main point of this bill, which is after TikTok. All of this is connected, okay? But the arrogance of the Western world. Think about this for a minute, okay? And I don't know what's going on. My internet says I have excellent internet service. I have a backup internet service going on, and yet my screen is freezing in my dashboard. So if I'm still here, somebody put up a thumbs up. But I'm gonna talk because it'll record anyhow, because it's still recording on my end. And if I'm cut off, I'll just re-release it. You know, it is what it is. But I want you to think about this. The UK, France, Belgium, the US, Germany, Sweden, and all of these Western nations have openly and even boastfully stated that they will continue to arm Ukraine. As a matter of fact, before I even go further, I'm going to play those two clips I played before. And this will be right in line with us talking about the arrogance and racism and hubris of American leaders and Western leaders, okay? It's okay for the U.S. and its allies to openly brag about and even boast about supplying Ukraine with modern weapons to fight Russia, to attack Russia, to rebuff Russia. And they say that this is a national security of national security interest, excuse me. And then they dismiss any interest, whether it be personal or in the state of national security, for the Chinese to do the same. Your interests don't matter. Your reasoning for doing what you do don't matter. Your position to try to better your economy for your people doesn't matter, because we have a bone to pick with Russia. And what you're doing is interfering with what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is always supersedes what every other nation wants to do. That's the mind state that these people have. Absolutely insane, bizarro world politics, okay? I'm going to replay two clips. I wasn't even planning to play the clips. I was deleting clips off my dashboard before the show. But somehow I didn't delete these, okay? So I'm going to play these two clips back to back. And after these two clips back to back, don't think they're long. One is 146 and one is 139, okay? And then once you get this in your head, I want you to think about how outrageous it is for Blinken to be in China demanding that the Chinese ignore their own national security and the will of the people, 1.45 billion people, so that America can exercise global hegemony. Have you lost your flipping mind? I just want you to look at this, okay? We'll come back right after the clips, back to back.
President Biden on the final leg of his mission to Europe. He's in Finland this morning after making a pledge of support for Ukraine at the NATO summit in Lithuania.
We will not waver. We will not waver. I mean that. Our commitment to Ukraine will not weaken. We will stand for liberty and freedom today, tomorrow, and for as long as it takes.
Elizabeth Schultz is with the president in Helsinki. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, George. In the final stop of this trip, President Biden is taking a victory lap, touting the expansion of the NATO alliance to include Finland and soon Sweden. Biden just met with the president of Finland, insisting that the U.S. and Nordic allies are more united than ever against Vladimir Putin, with Russia's border just about 100 miles from here. It is a split screen from almost exactly 5 years ago to this day, when former President Trump met here with Putin. In that major speech in Lithuania, Biden blasted the Russian leader for underestimating how the U.S. and its allies will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. They're now pledging long-term security guarantees. And after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky sharply criticized NATO countries, yesterday he struck a much more positive, grateful tone in an hour-long meeting with President Biden. Both leaders calling that meeting a success. But at the end of the day, there is still no timeline for when Ukraine could join the NATO alliance, even after the war ends. George.
Okay, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC.
So today, leaders have endorsed NATO's new strategic concept. It makes clear that Russia poses the most significant and direct threat to our security. In the current concept, we state that Russia is a strategic partner. Ukraine can count on us for as long as it takes. They are fighting for their independence, but they're also fighting for values which are important for NATO, fundamental for NATO. The sovereignty, the territorial integrity of every nation, and therefore this matters for our security. The decision to invite Finland and Sweden to become members demonstrates that NATO's door is open. It demonstrates that President Putin did not succeed in closing NATO's door. NATO's door remains open. Allies are also investing more in modern capabilities, contributing more to NATO deployments and exercises, and we have agreed to increase NATO's common funding.
Now, I want to play that last clip I played. I want to play a few seconds of it for you, okay? Because it's very important that you see or hear something that he stated. Because what he stated, he ignores when it comes to China and Russia, okay? It's very important. And I just heard it when I this part right here when I played this clip. I had never heard this this reasoning before until now. I want to play this again and I'll stop it.
So today, leaders have endorsed NATO's new strategic concept. It makes clear that Russia poses the most significant and direct threat to our security. In the current concept, we state that Russia is a strategic partner. Ukraine can count on us for as long as it takes. They are fighting for their independence, but they're also
boom, right there. Ukraine can count on us for as long as it takes. He puts his hand like this. They are fighting for their independence. Now, let's look at the situation, okay? And let's examine it as it is. And this is a direct connection to Blinken's trip to China, his threats, and his bluster, okay? Openly, the U.S. and NATO stated that they are what? Going to stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. They're going to continue to finance. They're going to continue to arm it, even as they look back within their own domestic borders and things are collapsing and declining at a massive rate. Okay? So now look, he said they are fighting for their independence. Now let's look at this whole situation. President Vladimir Putin has been warning since coming into office of the Russian Federation as the president about the constant disregard for nations to be sovereign state, the constant disregard for international law, the constant disregard for territorial integrity and independence as a nation. And he said that the United States and NATO have been overstepping all bounds and all limits to international law and what is normal in international diplomacy, right? Way when he got into office. Now, why did Russia start the military operation? It wasn't that he was a crazed leader. He tried to reason with the United States over and over and over and over and over again. And we know, because you can Google it, you can Bing it, you can Yahoo it, you can DuckDuckGo it, that he kept trying to tell them, listen, we view this as a national security threat. There's no way that we can allow you to set up bases, or NATO to set up bases in Ukraine. Your missile defense systems can be turned into offensive systems, and they can hit Moscow within minutes. This is unacceptable. This is an unacceptable threat to the Russian Federation. Now, right before he ordered the military, special military operation, he tried to reason with the people, and they publicly stated, listen, this is what is acceptable. This is what was agreed upon. You must go back to what we agreed upon, and there can be no if, and, or buts about it. If this, what we agreed upon as leaders of these nations, me of the Russian Federation and you of the United States and these other leaders of other individual European or / NATO countries, if you do not do this, then you will tie our hands. So the United States went to work arming and training Ukraine, removing all semblance of Russian culture in Ukraine, making with the propaganda, making Ukrainians hate the connection between Ukrainians and Russian. Don't they do that all the time? Didn't they do that with the blacks that they stole and brought over to America and disconnected them from Africa? Didn't they do that with the Native Americans, how they disconnected them from the natives in Mexico and South and Central America, and how they were connected to Africa too? Didn't they do that to the indigenous population of Eastern Europe? Didn't they do that to the indigenous population in the Middle East? Didn't they do that to the indigenous population and are trying to do that in Asia? We see a pattern here of divide and conquer. Okay? Let's make no mistakes about it. We call an ace an ace and a spade a spade. If it doesn't matter. Obama was in office, he's black. Joe Biden is in office, he's white. Trump was in office, he's white. It doesn't matter the shade, the purpose, or the color. They are all working towards the same goal of American hegemony at all costs. You understand? Now, why did I bring this to you? So we can break down the reality of the situation and understand what is really taking place right in front of us, okay? Now, after negotiating and then hand delivering the papers and the agreements that were signed and that were agreed and the clauses that were agreed upon decades before, and how Russia put this stuff together and say, listen, this is the only acceptable way for our national security. You've got to get out of Ukraine. Ukraine didn't serve your national interests prior to the falling of the Soviet Union, so why should it be in your national interest right now? Huh? But see, you can't pick Ukraine up and take it over and put it next to Mexico. But one thing we do know is that Ukraine resides on the border of Russia. And in fact, some of Ukrainian territory is historically Russian. Okay? So you have to think with that mind state. Half of Ukraine was Russian. Ukraine has a history with Russia. They have a cultural and a racial connection. But the United States and NATO are there stirring up trouble. So when the terms of the agreement were rejected, Vladimir Putin gave them one more chance. And then he said, if this is not accepted, then we will have to have a military technical response or a technical military response. Everybody was, this. And what happened? Because the United States, we just found out they had multiple bases, germ warfare bases and intelligence bases right on the border with Ukraine and Russia. I'm talking about miles away from the Russian Federation, not hundreds of miles, miles. Would this be acceptable for the United States? Would this be acceptable for the UK? Would it be acceptable for France? Then what the hell make you think that it's acceptable for Russia or China or Nigeria or Chad? Huh? This is this Eurocentric exceptional mind state that I keep telling you about. What's good for me does not apply to you. Do as I say, not as I do. When it bothers me, it's a national security threat. When it bothers you, oh, you're getting winded for no real reason. We have no plans of doing this. I want you to think about this as we're talking, because this goes directly to why America is trying to strong arm China right now. In the 60s, we almost had a nuclear holocaust, a nuclear war, because the Russian Federation had deployed nuclear bombs in response to the United States deploying them in Germany and Turkey. Nuclear capable missiles in Cuba. Cuba is 100 plus miles away from the United States. And the U.S. national security establishment and the deep state said this was an unacceptable national security risk, and they had embargoed a military embargo on Cuba. Which means that if Russia had tried to send in reinforcements, then America would have taken it as a direct threat to the United States national security, and war would have ensued thereafter, right? 110 miles away from the coast of Florida. But it's not a national security threat 1 to 2 miles from the border of Russia. Man, if you don't stop this foolishness, stop it. Common sense got to reign supreme. It's a national security threat if the Soviet Union deploys weapons 105 or 110 miles from the tip, not next to, but just like they say on the TV, just the tip, right, of Florida. But it's not a national security threat or a grave concern for the Russian Federation that you have chemical bases a mile or two away from the Russian Federation, and you have intelligence gathering centers right on the base, right on the border. Man, I'm telling you, absolutely insane. So why did I say that? And why did I take you to this? Because I wanted you to see the hypocrisy in all of this. And then the headline is this of Blinken. Because remember, Stoltenberg said that they're going to stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, right? Why? And then he answered with his hand over his heart, or because he doesn't have a heart, on that battery up in his chest. And he says, because they're fighting for their independence. What? Let's do that again when I go out of focus. What? So Russia is not fighting for its independence and its sovereignty and its national security, which you have in military bases and all around Russia. Why do you feel the need that you have the right to expand up to other people's borders, and they got to change the way that they proceed or live their lives because you cannot quiet this or calm this insatiable hunger for domination? Huh? So now you openly boasted about standing with Ukraine and supplying Ukraine with all of these weapons, right? Then this is what this article says about Blinken and his trip to China. And remember, this has a direct correlation and connection with TikTok. Blinken to warn China against helping Russia in Ukraine conflict. Now, what's crazy about this? Let me see something real quick before I read this article. All right, I want to bring something up real quick for y'all. All right. Listen. According to Google, because remember, we heard when Wang Yi met Lavrov, the two foreign ministers, the two people who are over those two nations, Russia and China's foreign affairs and their diplomacy, they said that they had entered into a new phase of their strategic partnership, right? And they said that it was more than a military alliance. Okay? According to Google, what is the meaning of strategic partnership? Strategic partnerships are relationships between two entities, most commonly two companies, but can be two nations, with overlapping or complementary products or services that aim to achieve a mutually beneficial result. Strategic partnerships are also commonly referred to as an alliance or joint venture. Now stop right there. What did all of the EU and NATO leaders say about Russia when Russia said, hey, you can't do this? What did they say? Russia has no say or veto on NATO's policies, right? Why? Because NATO, the alliance, those individual nations which comprise of the terrorist organization called NATO, are in a strategic partnership or an alliance, right? So they disregard what Russia is saying because it is not a part of the alliance and it is not in partnership with the U.S. and NATO. Now, I said that for a reason, okay? Let's go back to Mr. Blinken. The headline is this: Blinken to warn China against helping Russia in Ukraine conflict. Well, Russia and Xi has already told us about their friendship, their partnership being more than just a strategic partnership. It is more than just an ordinary or average alliance. Their interests are converging in many areas in ways unlike anything that we've seen before. But the U.S. and NATO have a right to arm each other, finance each other, and not let Russia or any other nation have a veto on their policies. But China and Russia don't. Huh? I'm asking. You just heard the definition. Now let's go into the article. The top U.S. diplomat plans to threaten Beijing over weapons-related exports. Now, what's crazy about this is, for a second, let's forget we're talking about nations, okay? For 1 second, and let's look beyond nations and just view Blinken as the United States as a person, okay? Now, what if you were in debt to, let's say, you had a mortgage, you had a car, you had a boat, you had a vacation house, your livelihood depended on this certain company, right? And you are mad or teed off of a small policy change. You go to that office. Now, mind you, your livelihood and security, your family livelihood and security depends on the gratuity and the generosity of this company. You go to that company and start lambasting that company, threatening that company, telling them what they're not, telling you what you're not going to do and what they are not going to do. How do you think that would work out? Because they can pull your cars on your mortgage, your car that you have, your car that your wife have, the car that your children have, your boat, your vacation home. They can give you a bad credit where you can't get an apartment. They can do X, Y, and Z. Why? Because they hold the financial cards. And so anybody that does that, you would look at them like, what in the hell is wrong with these people? Are they crazy? Well, now let's go back to him being a representative, the foreign representative of a nation state called America. China was holding 1.2 to 1.3 trillion in U.S. debt. Janet Yellen, who was the Fed chair, who now resides as the Secretary of the Treasury, you see the revolving doors here, went over there to plead with China. She tried to give this strong persona. But behind closed doors, she was begging them to buy more debt. Production, this overproduction. Says who? When has anybody been mad that products were cheap? When has anybody been mad when you go into the store? And I'm just throwing out some, because I just see an ad say Doritos up here. All right. And the Doritos, because the company is pumping them out so much, Doritos go from $7 a bag to $1 a bag. And you go mad. What is the Dorito company doing? They're oversupplying Doritos. No, you're the beneficiary of that oversupply. So you look crazy going against that, right? That's what Janet Yellen looked. She looked insane, but she is insane. Now we see Mr. Blinken saying that he would threaten. Oh, man, I tell you what. China is your largest supplier of all goods. Remember, we go through this all the time. Between 92 and 95% of all goods on U.S. store shelves, regardless if it's Target, Walmart, or whatever, come from China or a subsidiary of China. That means that your shipping industry, forget the $1.3 trillion in debt that they had. And let us not forget that every month, every quarter, the U.S. is in a trade deficit with the Chinese. You understand? So now that's bad. But look at this. If 93 to 95% of all goods on the store shelves are a product of Chinese manufacturing in the trade between China and the United States, that means your banks rely on China. And I'm going to tell you how. That means your trucking companies rely on China. That means your shipping companies rely on China. That means your how you ship stuff via train relies on China. That means your cargo shipping, plain wise, is very reliant on China. Why? Because of the cheap goods, which means that there's a bigger profit for corporations, which means that they can take this to their shareholders and say, hey, you've made a profit, which is the objective of Western companies, is to make as much profit as they can at the expense of everybody, right? So now look, you go over there and you threaten them with what? Oh, there will be sanctions on your energy sector. We're going to sanction your solar section. Why? Why are you doing that? You're getting pounds for pennies on the dollar. Well, we see that even though we are making out like bandits, we don't want this to help your economy. But at the same time now, look, we're not trying to stop your rise. And we don't want any unfair advantages. We just don't want you to dominate the solar sector. Then you look at Elon Musk. His company has been hemorrhaging right now. It has been bleeding left and right because of that Chinese technology and the Chinese EVs. So now they have directed their ire at the Chinese solar sector, excuse me. And remember when they went at Huawei to try to break Huawei? And there was another company, I forget what it was, Exo or Zo or Zio or whatever. But the company had risen so high that it was rivaling. It had briefly overtaken Samsung and all of these Korean and Japanese phone companies that sell their products in the West. This was a no-no, so they went after that. They went after Huawei because Huawei is the leader in fifth and sixth generation Wi-Fi and technology. Because it is a non-white, non-Western nation, this cannot be allowed. Do you understand? And so Mr. Blinken goes over there, and this does not happen in a vacuum. Why would he announce he's going over there to threaten the Chinese, then proceed to take the trip over there to threaten the Chinese? The United States announces war games on the Korean Peninsula and more war games in the Pacific, Asia Pacific, with Japan and Australia and the UK, right? And then the US takes up the TikTok thing. Why? Because Zuckerberg, you know, he's the one who ripped off the idea, and the CIA financed him to do the Facebook or the Meta, which owns Instagram. Elon Musk, Twitter or X, Apple. Apple's profits are collapsing in Asia. Do you know that? Because of the new technology that is being infused into the phones and the computers by Huawei. You know that? And Apple was considered the biggest corporation in the world. But now that we see that TikTok has surpassed Meta and Twitter put together, they voted on stealing the ownership. Listen to me good. If this is not fascism, what is the definition of fascism? All right. It's when corporate interests and government policies meet, right? And they try to impose them on you. That means that the governments are working for the corporations, not the other way around. That's why you don't see these corporations paying the taxes. That's why you don't see these billionaires paying taxes. They put it on the back of the little man and woman, the middle class, the I won't say lower class because they're not lower, the poor people. And Meta and X and Instagram and all of these other social media platforms see their position slipping from them at breakneck speed. And if you control the largest platform by far, it ain't even close. Listen to me good. Go look at the metrics. It's not even close. TikTok has blown away all of them. And if you can no longer control the technology, guess what happens? You no longer control the narrative. And if you no longer control the narrative, you cannot propagandize people without opposition. You understand? So while Blinken is in China, they are trying to hold a technological gun to the head of China to say, listen, if you don't do this, and this, it's on the desk of Biden, and he'll sign it, and either you'll give us ownership or we'll ban you in the West. China should say to hell with you. Ban me, and I'm going to ban every Western product. See who collapses first. Ban me, and we're going to see if we can call in this $1.some trillion debt. Ban me, and I'm going to, because a ban is an embargo. You're trying to ban me with with chips, right? With the chips that go into the phones and stuff. Put another sanction on me. From the day that sanction is enacted, there will be a full embargo against you. I won't ship anything to you, anything. And if there's a secondary shipment coming from India or any other nation, I'm gonna sanction them too. Because China is responsible for 65 to 70% of all of this shipping stuff. So now, it goes right back to what I was just telling you about the banks, the cargo planes, the trains, the trucking. and the stores. If China embargoes the United States, that means that the stores would have 1 to 2 weeks worth of goods there, which means that after 1 to 2 weeks, there's no goods there, which means that the stores, big and small, would have to close down, which means unemployment, which means another heavy burden on the back of the government, which in turn means, guess what? That the trucking companies, the trains, and the cargo planes would have to shut down because they would have no product to ship to the stores, which means that the ports that receive the goods from China would have to shut down, more unemployment. Now, how does this affect the banks? Well, the banks lend out money, expecting to make a return. Well, if the trucks have no cargo to ship, they make no money, which means that they can't pay the loan that they got from you. If the planes have no cargo to ship, they can't pay the loan back. They can't buy the gas they need, which means that they'll have to shut down, which means high employment, which means another knife in the heart of U.S. imperialism. If the trains have no cargo to ship, they sit idle. They can't pay the loan back. This means that the financial sector would go belly up because there would be massive defaults and bankruptcies. China should make this clear when Blinken sits on the opposite side of that table. And they should be very mindful of what they're doing and be tactful about it. Say, look, Mr. Blinken, before we can go any further, there's something we think that we should make clear to you. You are not the nation that you were 20 or 30 years ago. And guess what? Neither are we. So your threats, leave them out at the door. Or guess what will happen? We will escort you to the door and we'll tell you to do what you have to do because we'll do what we have to do. And we'll see how that works out. And now, if you look, they have articles coming out. I was looking at a Wall Street Journal article. As a matter of fact, before I finish reading this article, I want to tell you the headline of that Wall Street Journal article. Where is it at? I pushed it to the side just for you guys. Okay, the headline of it is this. Man, I'm telling you, these people are full of more like the people that, because both of my sides of the family are really from Alabama. But listen, like they used to say in the country, these people are full of more than a Christmas turkey before you clean. For real. The title of the article, you can Google this. China's economy is failing. U.S. Indo-Pacific commander says. Now, let's look at that. Let's give him a little credit. And I'll go to the chat shortly. Hold on. Let's give him a little credit and say, well, he's speaking from a position of knowing. He has the knowledge of this. Okay. What is the first law of nature? I'm asking. Self-preservation, right? So listen to me. Let me go to the chat. Let me see some names up there real quick while I'm talking to you all. Okay. I see Ping 1 in there. That's the first one I saw. Okay, Ping 1. Now, if I owe Ping 1 money and Ping 1 was suffering financial hardships for his family, and we have it in a contract, I owe you X, Y, and Z, and it is supposed to be redeemed at your request, or else you can take this, and this from me. And I go to Ping 1, and I'm telling everybody, hey man, Ping 1 is collapsing. All the while, I'm living good and free of his gratuity and his I would say benevolence, right? I got cars, I got homes, I got all these mortgages off the gratuity of Ping 1. Then I tell everybody Ping 1 is about to collapse. I'm pretty sure, using common sense, that Ping 1 would call in the debt before he hits rock bottom. and his family doesn't have a home to stay in, and his family doesn't have transportation, and his family doesn't have food, Ping One will call in the debt, right? So let's just give a little credence to what this commander of the Indo-Pacific says. China's economy is failing. Evidently, you're failing more. You have to borrow the 1.2, 1.3 trillion from to stay afloat. And if China's economy is falling, why would you even be bragging about that smile? When 95% of your goods come from China. So if they go belly up, guess what happens? The knock-on effect. You go belly up too. So this is absolutely insanity. But nobody ever breaks this down and tell you like it is. Huh? Because they want to preserve this aura of American invincibility, American exceptionalism, American prosperity. And in reality, we're looking at the setting of the sun on the American empire. That's real. Let's go back to this article here. Blinken. And it says, the first paragraph goes like this. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken intends to warn Chinese officials of consequences for exporting materials to Russia with potential military applications when he travels to Beijing on Wednesday, which is today, right? Okay. What's wrong with that statement? It says to warn, right? That means he is telling them that if you do X, Y, and Z, there's impending danger that the United States would do X, Y, and Z. Now, is China threatening the United States economy? No. Is China threatening the United States politically? No. Are they doing it militarily? No. They're actually saying, listen, we all can have a win-win situation. We want to trade. We produce these products. You want these products. We can give them to you on credit. But you got to dial down this arrogance and this hubris. But when has America ever dialed down the arrogance and the hubris? Huh? So it goes and says this. Blinken, who is scheduled to make stops in Beijing and Shanghai during a 3-day trip to the People's Republic of China, plans to meet with Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He will reiterate deep concerns regarding the PRC's support for Russia's defense industrial base. Yes, I'm telling you, these people are out of their mind. When they do it, it's cool. But if you do it to me, or you do it to somebody I designate as an ally or designate as a national security interest, then that's a bad thing. That's a provocation. So shipping ATACMS to Ukraine that can travel into Russia's borders, that's no threat. That's no national security threat, right? That's not of deep concern. Repositioning 60% of your military to the Asia Pacific to prevent China's breakout capacity. And then on the one hand, claiming that you recognize the one China, and at the other hand, deploying Marines to Chinese Taipei, and then pushing them to provoke the Chinese mainland. That's not something that's a national security threat or something that we should be worried about. But China trading with its more than strategic partner, Russia is. Man, stop this foolishness. I know some of you guys, when you listen to this, and then you say, you know what, that's absolutely right. I know you got to shake your head and say, man, these people are lunatics. Right? But let's go a little further. And I see the chat. I'll get into some of that if it doesn't skip. God dang it. Okay, I'll get into it in a second. It says, at issue are China's exports of machine tools, microelectronics, optics, and other products that could be used to make weapons amid the conflict in Ukraine. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen issued a similar warning when she visited China earlier this month. Did I tell you that? Don't think that this stuff is happening in a void. So let's reread that part of that paragraph, okay? Because when you reread it and then you think about it, you say these people are absolutely crazy. It says blink. It says at issue, right? Meaning at the heart or the central part of the worry for the West is this: China's exports of machine tools, microelectronics, optics, and other products that could be used to make weapons amid the conflict in Ukraine. Now, if we examine that, it says that issue that, but it might, not that it is, it could be used. Could. If was fifths, we'd all be drunk. So, at issue are China's exports. There's no issue with European and U.S. exports of warplanes, missiles, right? Artillery, tanks, armored vehicles, radars, real-time intelligence from satellite. That's not of any concern. But what is of concern is China's export of machine tools, microelectronics, optics, and other products that could be. Could. So what they're doing, they're projecting. And think about the hypocrisy of this. We can do it, but you can't. And I want you to think about the lunacy of this. He's going there to set an ultimatum with the Chinese, who holds all this U.S. debt, with the Chinese, who's America's largest trade partner, with the Chinese, who's America's largest lender, with the Chinese, who supplies 93 to 95% of the goods on the store shelf. So you are going into the meeting holding a 22 at China's head, while all of the people in the room on the Chinese side have Iskander missiles aimed at you. Let's see how that works out. Let's see how that works out. All right. Ping one says, KK Canada also jailed Huawei's Ming Wanzhou for the U.S. in violating sanctions against Iran. Yeah, and we know that those were trumped up charges, and that gave, for them to do that, that showed you that they are willing to ignore international law, because that was an extraterritorial, extrajudicial rendition of a leader's daughter and a corporate head of a company on trumped up charges by the United States. But if this was in reverse and the Chinese did that to a Canadian, or think about if Elon Musk goes to China to check on his EV plant there, and the Chinese say, well, you know what, we're going to arrest you, and we're not allowing you to leave here because we have good information telling us that you were involved in the Ukraine conflict by allowing the Ukrainians to use your Starlink satellite. Even though they would have credibility on what they said. Think about the United States and the West if that were to take place. And they did the exact opposite. They did the same thing, but without any sound information or sound evidence against the person that they arrested. Do you see the hypocrisy of the West? I know you do. And as long as you come here, we're going to give it to you straight and raw without a chase. Okay? Regardless of all of the roadblocks that we get from all of the platforms, we're going to continue by God's grace to teach the truth. Okay? So let's go further. All right. It says the concern there is that through Chinese support, isn't that what partners are supposed to do? Isn't that what friends are supposed to do? But in the West, friendship you can never truly rely on. Aren't friends supposed to be there, not just in your good times, but in your dark times? Isn't your partner, your wife, or your husband supposed to be there and help you through whatever you are going through? Because you have become a tandem, a team, and you're trying to merge into one in the idea or the thought of producing a world that's better. So if this is the case, why would they even say this? The concern is that through Chinese support. Of course, they're going to support their more than strategic ally. The same way that if my wife had a problem, I'm going to support my wife throughout the problem. And if the problem continues to aggravate her, we're going to take care of the problem. You understand? That's real. We're going to get that problem out of the way. And we're going to do it as a tandem, right? As a team. Because we have the same mind of going forward in the future, building something. Well, that is what Russia and China is saying, right? So why would it concern the United States unless they have ulterior motives? Here it is on one hand, they arm everybody whom they think that they should arm to the teeth. And then they get mad at you if they suspect that you are giving your cousin a knife. Not a gun, but a knife or a rock to try to hold off the assailant. You have no right to help defend your family. You have no right to come to the aid of your friend. You have no right to stand up against what we're trying to do because it's against the rules-based international order. To hell with the rules-based international order. Okay? And who would want this order to succeed? Before we go further on this, I want to ask you a question. Who would want this rules-based order dominated by the United States and the UK to succeed? Let's look at the rules-based order. In the last 600 years, they have savaged the world. They took 80 million indigenous people here in America and reduced them to a population of 2 million. Genocide on a major scale. They took an entire people from Africa, held them captive, breeded them like animals, prevented them from reading, from having religion, from having any understanding of the surrounding area, put an information block on them, and treated them less than human. And now that you see the cities on fire in Chicago and all, you want to blame it on them. You want to hide your hand at this madness that you have stoked in everybody. How the hell can you expect somebody to be civilized when you breeded them as savages? Huh? You want to hide that. You don't want to talk about that because those are inconvenient truths. Isn't that what murderers and rapists do? They want to hide their crimes, and they want the victim to become the assailant, and they want to become the victim so as to not go over the legitimacy of the crimes that they've committed. Think about that. I was reading something in the Virginia House of Delegates in the 1800s, and they were discussing, and this goes with all this going on, and they were discussing, because I do a lot of this stuff. I've been doing it, reading this stuff forever. And they were talking about, they were discussing how to keep their slaves after removing, taking them out of slavery, how to keep them divided and to keep them relying on the slave master. And in this, they said, we have as far as possible extinguished every avenue by which light could enter the slave's mind. This is what they were discussing in the halls of power. And all of them came, yeah. So if we remove them, and look at this, I want you to understand something, because this has a direct correlation, because we talk about, but this has a direct correlation with how America and the Western world views everybody else and how they're treating everybody else as lower humans, right? I want you to look at this. No, and listen to me good. This is not about, this is about history. This is about facts, because everybody is scared because they're scared to offend it. Hell, I get emails by every color, right? And I get, as a matter of fact, I got some text messages and some messages from non-black people telling me to discuss these very issues, because it's needed to wake the people up so that they can organize and get this monkey of this government off the back of the people. All right? So listen. On the one hand, you breed a people. And I want you to understand just how brutal American history is. It ain't just in Gaza. not just in Afghanistan. Do you know that they have something called Juneteenth, which celebrates the ending of slavery, right? And they say that slavery started in 1619 or 1620, something like that. All right. But do you know they ripped out 64 years of history? If you go to the Library of Congress, the first 64 years of the slaves being here was so brutal that they did not want the masses to understand what was used, what they used, and the taxes that they used to enslave the people. From the time they got on the ships and they brought them here, from the very first moment the ship docked in America, guess what they did? If there was a pregnant woman, they sliced open her belly. The baby fell to the ground and they smashed the baby underfoot to instill fear. Then they would do something called buck breaking. Well, they would take the strongest and the biggest slave and they would rape him in front of everybody. A man would rape the man. The slave master would rape the man in front of him. And this psychological and physical and mental warfare went on for 300 plus years. And America she want to hide her hands about the problems of the violence and what's raging in inner city. Hell, you are the biggest proponent of it. But nobody, when you hear McGregor talks about the lawlessness and all, that's true. But they don't point the finger at the causes. You can never cure a disease by putting Band-Aids on cancer. You can never cure the disease by recognizing there's a disease and then say, take some Robitussin. Scientists, any learned person, this is why I get teed off with some of these people that do these interviews. Any sound, sane person understands to get to the bottom of something, you have to do research. Once you research it, you find out its strengths and its weaknesses, what it likes and what it dislikes. And what you do, you experiment to come up with a sound vaccine or something that can prolong the life of the host body. We are trying to give you something that will prolong your mental longevity, your mental prosperity, by attacking these issues head on and not running from them, even if people get mad about it. They're doing this. Think about what I just told you about the brutality and the viciousness. And it's always the other person who suffered is the reason for the suffering. The Palestinians are the reason that they're suffering, even though you took people from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and put them into Palestine and held the people who are indigenous there as captives. And they are lashing out over 70 years of being held down, and it's the Palestinians who are the terrorists. You go thousands of miles over to Afghanistan on trumped up charges. Remember, created Osama bin Laden, Tom Osman. You created the Taliban. The freedom fighters are the ones that you mentioned on Rambo at the end in the credits. The brave Mujahideen. You're talking about the Taliban. The people don't know that that's what you're talking about, but we do. And then you scream about what they're doing. Look at what's going on in Arabia. You're talking about this Wahhabism when it was Britain, the United States, and France who made Wahhabism and even put these bandits called the House of Saud in power. Look at these fiefdoms and these sheikdoms and all of this all over the Middle East, these tyrants that the West says these are corrupt leaders. Well, guess who put them there and who helps to maintain them? Because it's not no Venezuelan warplane that they're flying. F-15s, F-16s. They have Patriot missiles, right? Let's call an ace a ace and a spade a spade. You look, and wherever they go, the victim becomes the aggressor. In Iraq, the people are still screaming about them coming out of there. And they'll go and bomb the legitimate forces of Iraq and then say this was in self-defense, even though the people say, get out of here. These insurgents, these people are indigenous to Iraq now. But they are the insurgents and the terrorists, and you travel thousands of miles away to force them into submission to your will, your way of life, your culture, and what you deem is necessary for their survival or their prosperity. You're doing it in Syria, stealing the wheat, stealing the corn, stealing the oil, stealing the gas, killing the people, dividing up the nation. And you say you're doing it to fight terror. But you don't have any ill intentions towards Russia as you continue to arm and supply weaponry of the most advanced kind of the Western world to Ukraine to fight its Russian neighbor and brother. Russia is the aggressor, though. Man, I tell you what, y'all don't stop this foolishness. Let's go further. I have to tell you these things because nobody else does. They act like they're scared to talk to you guys. Listen, if we can have a relationship built on honesty, built on truth, and respect of views and persons, we don't need to communicate. Because if you can't have that, then you're not civilized. You don't have the mental capacity to grow. Right? I won't accept everything you say. You won't accept everything I say. But one sign of a civilized person is to be agreeable to disagree. That's it. What did your Bible tell you? When I was a child, I did as a child. I spake as a child. But now that I am no longer a child, I put away those childish things, right? That means growth mentally and spiritually. You understand? It's more important than political growth. It's more important than financial growth. Because every day you got to deal with you. Other people don't have to, but you, I don't care where you turn. I don't care where you go. I don't care where you sleep. I don't care where you work. Every day you have to deal with you. And the best way to deal with you is to be honest with you. Because if you're honest with yourself, guess what happens? It breaks open a door, breaks open a wall, and then you can be more forthcoming and honest with other people. You understand? Man, I'm telling you, these people today, they're built different. Maybe they needed to grow up when I came up, when my grandmother would beat the brakes off of you when you were off the chain or whatever, or when the parents you were in grown people's conversation and your parents would knock you in your head or something like that. Maybe they need that, because it seems like even the most rational person in appearance becomes irrational when you feed them facts that are in opposition to the falsehood that they've held dear to them in their head and in their hearts. All right? So D.G. Ter says, Asia leading humanity into the future. It says, it is too late anyway. I think you mean there is. 83% of non-Western world population thing. Oh, yeah. The demographics. And this is what's driving them mad too. The demographics. The non-Western world no longer has the monopoly on finance, politics, and even military. And for centuries, they've enjoyed that hegemony. Whether it was passed from Spain to France, from Belgium to the UK, England at the time, or Britain at the time, to the United States. They've had that and they've enjoyed that luxury, an unfair playing field. And this is outrageous to them because they cannot fathom a world outside of their scope of governance. They cannot fathom a better world of justice and equality and a fair playing field. Because if it's a fair playing field, I might be able to outcompete you. If you don't have the luxury of the dollar or the pound or the euro, I may be able to outcompete you. I may be able to bring these ideas up here into reality. This is a no-no, because that means that the corporations won't be dominating everything. They won't be in power like that. You understand? I hope you do. So let's go a little further. MJK says Ping 1 is correct. KK Canada is a vassal state of the U.S., weasel country, not just the U.S. Do you know that the UK's largest military base is in Canada? Do you know the UK's largest military base is the size of a city? Do you know that? not just the U.S. You got to understand, the U.S., the U.K., the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all of these nations that were founded upon the blood of the indigenous population are traced right back to the UK. Okay. DG Tur says, yes, they can crash the U.S. economy, but want to siphon more wealth first. You know what? That could be it, but I have a different take on it. And your take could be right. But this is what I think. I think China is playing for time. I think that they are playing for time. Listen, as time goes on and moves forward, China becomes in a more advantageous position while America continues to decline, which means that if America continues to decline, guess what happens? So does the West, because America is the weight-bearing pillar of Western hegemony. You understand? So China is playing for time. Why do you think? Because some people made this, they used to ask this question: why won't China just sell off all of the debt? Well, we know that China is selling off some of the debt, but they used to say, if I was China, I would sell off all of that, because when the economy collapsed, they'll lose 1.2, 1.3, some even say $1.5 trillion. And I would evaluate what they were saying, and I was like, yeah, that's a good point of view. But then my mind is always working, and I said, well, put myself in China's stead. At the time, my military was not fully mature enough to win a war against America. I could hold them off and maybe rebuff them, but I could not go on the offensive and win a military confrontation. Now, then look, should I go to war with the United States at a time when they have all of the international levels of control and the media organization on their side? Maybe I should buy for time until I can undercut this, set up my own financial institutions that could bypass the dollar, even because the United States is now talking about sanctioning China and removing them off the SWIFT system. You know that, right? That's a big thing that they're trying to do now, because they say China and Russia are trying to lead a crusade against the West. That's their rationale for it. But insane people, they will rationalize anything. Yeah, I killed that person, but I killed them because they were drinking too much water. Don't you see? Water is a valuable commodity. In the mind of irrational people, they think that they can rationalize anything, right? But listen, so if you put yourself in the stead of China and you say, why won't they sell off that debt? Because $1.2, $1.5 trillion, that's a lot of money to lose. And then I'd start thinking about some of the things that I was reading and hearing, and some of the things that were said to me by financial people behind closed doors. And some of them even said it publicly, about how China was accumulating huge reserves, not just of oil. The United States has that oil reserve. China has a commodity reserve where they are accumulating all of the necessary commodities that is needed in case of a global depression. They can still forge forward because they would have huge amounts of things in store or in reserve. And I said, that would make sense. And then when the people were telling me, not only that, China is not just holding $1.3, $1.5 trillion. When they do investment in other countries, they're using those bonds to build up those railways, those trains, those airports and stuff. So on paper, it's 1.3, 1.5 trillion. But in reality, it's much, much less than that. And then when we look at it, we say, well, still, let's just say 700 billion. That's still a lot of money to lose. And that's why I believe that China has hedged itself against the law. They have already said, you know what? We're willing to lose that. To supplant the United States and get these crazy people out of control of global politics and finance, we're willing to sacrifice that $700 billion. And what they have done is invested heavily in buying gold and silver, platinum and palladium and all of this stuff that hedges against inflation, that hedges against a dollar default. China publicly states that they only have about 2,000 tons of gold. But Jim Rogers, Peter Schiff, and other pundits who do research and who crunch the numbers say that China has, and this was a year or two ago, had roughly between 30 and 40,000 tons of gold. You understand? Russia has accumulated gold. Have you ever? I want you to understand. Let's look at the BRICS for a minute. Not just the nations that have joined the BRICS and the nations that are going to join the BRICS. Let's just look at the 5 members of BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. What's important about that? Brazil has huge gold reserves, untapped gold mines. Russia has huge gold reserves and gold mines and other commodities. India has been accumulating massive amounts of gold. Now let's look at China, the largest importer, the largest miner, and the largest holder of gold, quote unquote. Do you know that the Chinese sell gold in their vending machines? Do you know that their citizens hold thousands upon thousands of tons of gold that can be called upon if needed, if the dollar collapses and the savings that they had in the West evaporates? The citizens have the gold. And then the Chinese nation has huge reserves, and it's against the law for the gold that is mined to go out of China. So I believe all of this is a plan, and they're hedging all of their bets, and they have come up with a strategy that if America does this, we have a play for it. If America does this, we have a play for it. If America in the West does this, we have a play for it. Boom, 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 boom. They are dotting all of the I's and crossing all of the T's. This is what I see. Because if you look logically and you investigate just a little bit, this will add up to the Chinese and the BRICS nations and their allies, the global South, positioning themselves to take a loss when it comes to the dollar, the pound, and the euro, but coming out on the other side as the main powers due to their reserves of gold. Remember that the West no longer has those reserves of gold. They have been leasing gold and transferring gold from West to East to try to pay off debt. Matter of fact, you know, it's a clip I played on here before. We'll go to that real quick, okay? Everybody, thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate this as we talk about the U.S. and NATO and their insatiable hunger for war. So I believe, knowing that, I believe the Chinese are hedging themselves against the debt monster that will eventually just swallow whole the entire Western world, because the EU is collapsing. What does the EU have? They don't have any commodities. The one European country that had gold and fertile land and had oil and gas is in a state of war. That's Ukraine. Well, Russia is no, Russia is not. Russia wants to be a European country, but the majority of Russia's landmass lies in Asia. That qualifies Russia as an Asian nation. You understand? Regardless to the leaders in Moscow saying it, they're European. They are not. That's why the West will not accept them. Even though they have white skin or some white skin, the West will not accept them. They call them orcs. They look at them and call them snow niggers. I'm not making this stuff up. Because they understand that Russia's future lies in the East. You understand? And that's why they have this insatiable appetite to wage war, weaken, then eventually balkanize Russia and seize its assets. You understand? So when we're viewing this thing, we have to view it in that mind, okay? View it in that mind. As a matter of fact, before we go to that clip, let me check. It says I have a message on here. Yeah, Flying Crocodile, you're absolutely right. It seems that 90% of Western rhetoric is projection these days. Absolutely. I would even say closer to 100%. P1 says this stuff needs to be brought, the ugly truth needs to be brought to light. Right. Jay Blue, they got the audacity to deny people reparations after these horrors. Oh man, the horrors are way. Listen, I have black, brown, red, yellow, and white. I advise you all to go and pull up some of the stuff on the Library of Congress and see how brutal these people were to black people. I'm not talking about the roots kind. I'm talking about, if you see this, it will bring tears to your heart. And then they would discuss, and here's the kicker right here. Before doing this, they would discuss this in the houses of Parliament, the houses of power, I should say, in the United States. And it was one president, John Adams, I believe that was John Adams, who refused to have slaves because he said that he thought that it was immoral to, on one hand, be a Christian, and on the other hand, own slaves. George Washington didn't have no problem. And George Washington was a convict. He was most people don't know this, he was a fugitive from England. They don't teach you that in the history book, but he was a fugitive from England. So he had to make his stand here in America. You understand? A lot of those people were fugitives. But go to the library. I'm asking you all, look up this stuff on the Library of Congress, okay? You'll see what I'm talking about. But let's go further. It says, and then you say, face it, they got where they are today because terror played a major role in their wealth. Terror was the major and the most vital instrument in the rise of the Western world. They terrorized the people they took from Africa. They terrorized the indigenous people in Australia. They terrorized the indigenous people in Asia. They terrorized the indigenous people in Latin America and the Caribbean. They terrorized the indigenous people of Eastern Europe. Hell, they're still terrorizing them. And look what they're doing in Ukraine. We're friends of you. How in the hell can you be my friend when you have had over 500,000 of my people exterminated? Do you let me drop this here for you all as we talk about the extermination of the people of Ukraine. Do you know, and this is a fact that they hide from history. You know, I like to bring historical facts to light. Do you know that over 100 million people died between the slave passage from Africa to the Western world? Do you know over 100 million people died? Over 100 million people. You understand that? That's not genocide. The West screams about 6 million. Even Kissinger and Nixon didn't even believe it was 6 million. I think Nixon said it may have been 100,000 or 200. I believe he said that. But think about that. Compared to 100 million, and then the millions that were killed on a yearly basis. And let me get this fact to you all before we go to this clip here about the gold and silver. All right. Do you know the term picnic? Right? Because I hear a lot of them say we're having a picnic. We're doing it. Do you know where that comes from? And the term barbecue. You know where that comes from? I want to lay this on everybody. I like I don't care if you're watching, I want you to inform because knowledge is power, especially if you can apply it. Picnic came from a term that white Americans had when they would go and pick out of a crowd of black people, and they would pick one, right? And it was shortened to picnic, but it was called pick a nigger. You know that? And when they would pick them on Sundays after they come from church, they would hang them and burn them. I'm not making this stuff up. Google this. They would hang them and burn them. They would pick them out of. They wouldn't be doing anything. They would just pick one. That one right there, and they called it picnic, and that's why people would get dressed up, and they would have baskets, and they would eat, and they would celebrate the burning of or the lynching of that person. And when they burned them at the stake, they called it barbecue. No lie. Go look it up. So I like to empower you with these little facts here and stuff. And sometimes these are inconvenient, and they will make you kind of, like get mad, or sometimes they would make you uncomfortable when you hear these. But you have to accept facts, because if you deny facts, how can you progress in the future? Because falsehood can't progress. You look at the financial system and the political system of the West right now. It progressed so long as it was able to exploit people. And now that other poles of powers are rising, it is fast sinking. Why? Because it was built on the platform of exploitation, which means lies. Because the only way you can exploit somebody is to deceive and lie to them. Right? But had it been built on a respect of man and woman, a respect of God. I'm not talking about in words, I'm talking about respecting God and doing what's right. The system wouldn't collapse. There would be no need for a new system. You understand? So let's go a little further. It says the globalist incognito. What's up? The globalist cabal conquers countries by bribing its politicians. That's how they conquered America. Well, they conquered America through deceit, and then they bribed. They bribed the Native American. Well, the Native Americans pulled them out of the fire a few times when they were starving and they were suffering from these diseases in the New World. The Native Americans saved them on multiple occasions. Okay, and then they whooped the Native Americans out of the state of New York for $25 because they wrote the terms in English and the Native Americans didn't know how to speak English. Just put your X right here. Just put your X on this paper right here. And that's how they acquired these states. New York. I think it was $25. It could have been $25 in some blankets or $35 in some blankets or something like that. Yeah. Flying Crocodile says China still has close to $2 trillion that it needs to offload before the U.S. economy crashes. I don't think it has $2 trillion. I was talking to a few people, and as a matter of fact, if you go to Global Times, it's one of the official newspapers of the Chinese government. I think recently, sometime this week, or it could have been last week, just Google it, it may come up. They were offloading debt, and I think the debt is down to like 700 billion. That's why I came up with the number 700 billion, because I was reading that article on the Global Times. And then I read another article on I forget the Iranian news service about that. But yeah, and then I did a South African, and yeah, they were saying numbers are like 700, 800 billion. So that's why I didn't pull that number out of the air. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Man, this thing is flipping. Okay, it just went down. Yeah, Michael, I'm sorry if I don't get to you. I'll try to scroll back up and stuff after I play the video, but it's jumping on this thing right here. So please charge it to my head, not to my heart. I'm not ignoring anybody's comment. I'll go back and try to look and see. But it's down here. It says DG Tur says a war with China is literally the end of this world. I think the war with Iran would be the end of this world. And am I saying there will be a nuclear exchange? No. Because think about this. America has been able to rule the world, and her Western partners have been able to rule the world by demonstrating complete domination over nations, right? And I believe that when war breaks out between the United States and Iran is going to give the U.S. and its allies everything that they can handle. And even if the United States come out the victor, she will come out nonetheless of the Middle East, because she will come out limping and not walking or running. And being a handicapped former hegemon and then transitioning to take on a rising China, I think the start of the collapse of the Western world or the rules-based order is a war with Iran, because they want their weaknesses, their deficiencies, all of that will show. And we all know that America does not have the capital, the political or the financial capital, to then wage a war with Iran and then go headlong into a war with China. I'm not saying that they're not going to do this now, because I believe they're going to do this, and insanity reigns supreme. But they won't have that luxury after that war with Iran, because you'll see aircraft carrier groups sunk. This is not me saying it. These are estimated guesses from war planners of the West. And if you're seeing 1 or 2 aircraft carriers sunk, you're seeing all of the missile bases that America and the UK have over in the Middle East and North Africa bombed to smithereens. This will be such a blow to American prestige and hubris. And the military will be in a state of disarray as it positions to fight a rising global superpower. So I believe that it starts with Iran, and then I think that it'll go regional. Let's see. Michael N says, gold vending machines. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm not putting all your comments up. I'm sorry. I was just reading them because it's something I want to get to. And I'm sorry for not doing this. It says gold vending machines. Wow. Yeah, the Chinese have gold vending machines. Yeah. You can get gold and silver out of the vending machines everywhere. You know, what they're doing, they're empowering their citizenry. Because think about this. If they buy this gold and silver on a daily basis, and they go home and they hold it as a hedge against the decline of the yuan or the collapse of the dollar. If we have a global depression, guess what? The government then can call on the citizens, because they know who bought it, they know where they stand. They can call on the citizens to give the gold and silver to the government, and the government will pay them in a new currency or a stronger yuan backed by the very reserves that the citizens and the government has. You know, I think that's sound. I think that's smart. Incognito say the Genghis Khan's bastards, talking about the United States. Let's see. Yeah. Ping One says U.S. Congressman openly calling for Palestinian genocide. I'm gonna leave that comment. Matter of fact, I'm gonna put that comment on the screen. I'm gonna leave that up there because I want to address that after this clip. I want to go back to a clip about the gold that China has. This is 8 minutes. I played this on 3 occasions on the show, but this goes hand in hand with what I'm going to tell you. And I'm gonna play something about the U.S. debt before we get off the air. Man, we've been on here for a while. Let's see. Let me see if I still have that one about the rising U.S. debt. Hold on 1 second. Yeah. So what I'll do, instead of keeping you all this long, I'll play the other one because that's 8 minutes. Both of these are almost 9 minutes. Then I'll come back and we'll chop it up on that. Then we'll chop it up on this comment here. Then we'll close out because I don't want to try your patience anyhow. And remember, hit the like button, subscribe, share. Okay. And since I'm on here talking to you all, I want you to do me a favor, everybody. We know that they continue to take the subscribers. Push the channel over 4,000 subscribers. Every one of you get 3 people to subscribe to the channel. Okay? Do that. Let's beat the brains out of the algorithm. Okay? So let's go a little further. Let me play the clip. I want you to pay close attention to what this guy is saying, okay? Because some people miss this point. That's why I play it. When I play videos over and over, it's because when I tried to give it to some people, it went over their heads. And so sometimes you need a second or a third or even a fourth look to process what you're hearing. So I want you to listen to this.
Gold is some useless, inert asset, right, whose heyday was in the 19th century, as irrelevant to modern finance as the horse is to transport. Maybe not. Today we return to a favourite theme of ours, and once I haven't looked at since probably 2019, and that is, how much gold does China have? And for those with short attention spans who don't want to watch to the end of this video, I'll cut straight to the chase. China has much more gold than it says it does. In fact, it has more gold than the US. Its enormous gold hoards are all part of its grand global reserve currency status designs. Right, now time to back up those assertions. Let's do an audit. Audits involve a lot of numbers, and too many numbers can get a little overwhelming, so I'm going to try and keep these numbers to a mentally digestible minimum. But let me start with perhaps the most important contextual figure and anchor that in your minds, and that is US gold holdings. Official records show that the United States owns some 8,133 tonnes, most of it in Fort Knox. Although I should say that gold in Fort Knox hasn't been audited for 50 years. The US is the world's largest gold owner, or so you would have thought, and gold comprises 77% of United States foreign exchange reserves. China's officially declared holdings are 1,948 tonnes, so about a bit less than a quarter of the US, and that makes up just 3% of its $3.2 trillion of foreign exchange holdings. The real number is, of course, much higher than that. China has been the world's largest gold producer since 2007. This past decade, it has produced about 15% of all the gold mined in the world. Last year, it produced 380 tonnes, which is about 20% more than the world's second largest producer, Australia. And since 2000, China has mined roughly 6,500 tonnes of gold, and more than half of Chinese gold production is state-owned. China National Gold Corporation alone accounts for 20%. So already, just on Chinese gold production alone, that official 1,948 tonne figure looks doubtful. Crucially, China keeps all of the gold it mines. Exporting domestic gold production is not allowed. And with reserves in decline at home, Chinese mining companies have also been buying assets abroad, across Africa, South America and Asia. And international production exceeded domestic production by about 15 tonnes last year. But as well as being the world's biggest producer, China is also the world's biggest importer of gold. It's hard to get precise import figures, but we do know that, for example, via Hong Kong alone, over 6,000 tonnes has entered the country since 2000. So if you add that to cumulative gold production since 2000, you get a figure of 13,200 tonnes. Whether imported, mined or recycled, most of the gold that enters China goes through the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the SGE, including the gold imported from Hong Kong. So SGE withdrawals, for which we do have numbers, can act as something of an approximation for demand, and it is possible to get numbers for SGE withdrawals. Since 2008, roughly 20,000 tonnes have been withdrawn from the SGE. Then we have to add in all the gold held in China, whether as bullion or jewellery, prior to 2000, and the World Gold Council estimates a figure of 2,500 tonnes in privately held jewellery. If you add domestic mining and official reserves, you arrive at a figure of about 4,000 tonnes. Now, Nick Laird of Gold Charts Are Us, one of the world's leading gold data experts, has cobbled it all together to produce this chart, which shows cumulative gold held in China to be around 28,911 tonnes. I've spoken to numerous analysts, Ross Norman, Bron Suchetsky, formerly of the Perth Mint, Koos Janssen, and they all arrive at similar estimates. In addition, there is gold entering China that is not accounted for by SGE withdrawals. Ross Norman points out that the People's Bank of China, the PBOC, likes to buy 12.5 kilo gold bars. They don't trade on the SGE. Also, the PBOC often uses dollars on exchanges in London, Dubai and Switzerland, while the SGE sells its gold in yuan. The army too owns gold and doesn't have to declare its purchases. Remember, there are many state agencies on top of the army and the central bank which buy gold. There's the State Administration of Foreign Exchange and China Investment Corporation, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, to give you two examples. So how much of all that huge hoard is state-owned? 40%? 50%? 60%? But at 50%, the implication is that China owns roughly 14,500 tonnes. That is 1.8 times more than the US. Now, it may be that only 20 or 30% of that gold is state-owned. I find that unlikely, but even if that's the case, it still owns more than the US. And China has been famously encouraging its citizens to buy gold since 2008. And the SGE has actually stated that only consumers buy gold over exchange. But it almost doesn't matter. This encouragement to buy gold, as one of my readers resident in China reported to me, kicked off a frenzy of laundry as China's citizens rushed to exchange the hordes of hooky cash they'd built up. In his local bank in Shanghai, he said, in 2009, he was standing behind a Chinese bloke who was unlocking bundles of euros, US dollars, Singapore dollars, Swiss francs in exchange for 5-kilo gold bars across the counter. Gold ownership in China is registered, so the government knows how much its citizens have. But it's commonly thought that should Beijing invite private holders of gold to support a major government currency initiative by pledging their gold as a kind of war bond, then there would be a 99% pickup. The vast majority of Chinese trust their government, especially when it comes to returning China to the top of the world. And that means a considerable amount of extra gold can very quickly be mobilized to participate in whatever Beijing is planning. Chinese gold holders don't have the same mistrust of government held by Western gold bugs. The party's seen as a good housewife to the nation. But the disruption it would cause means there's no way China can declare such large official holdings, not yet anyway. There'd be an unwanted surge in both the yuan and the gold price. The government's $3.2 trillion of US dollar foreign exchange reserves would be devalued. And to declare that much gold would be a direct challenge to American supremacy, which China is, I don't think, yet ready for. Parity first, then supremacy. So for now, they follow Deng Xiaoping's doctrine of we must not shine too brightly until everything is ready. President Trump wrong-footed the Chinese, and that and COVID, the great accelerator, may have brought schedules forward. The Chinese president Xi Jinping is known as a man of destiny, and he may want the great ascension to happen on his watch. But backing its money, if only in part with gold, as empires on the rise are wont to do, would give China great credibility in a world awash with money printing.
All right. So I want to address something before we talk about the Palestinian, and I want to also put a super chat up on the screen in just a second. But who was it? Dang, this thing is jumping. Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to find it. Michael N says, while I'm looking, he says, thank God for the Eastern world. You better believe it. Oh, Jay Blue. That's who it was. I'm Jay Blue. Let me share another fun fact with you, okay, for everybody who's listening, and then we're going to address this China stuff and this Palestinian stuff. Do you know there was a man called John Hawkins? In some record books, it's Hopkins. But his name was John Hawkins, but some records have him as John Hopkins. You know, that's why you got the John Hopkins University or medical center and all that stuff from him. This is the guy who went and lived in Africa for 20 years. And then after he lived in Africa, he promised the people, he said, listen, you can come over where I'm going and you can make more 5, 10, 20 times what you're making here in gold. And so some of the first people who were shipped to the States or over here, they got on the boat called, and listen to me good, people don't get out of shape, bent out of shape. You can quickly find this stuff out to see if I'm telling you the truth or I'm lying. Remember this, none of this comes from me now. This comes from history. So just hold your horses. So as the ship got further away from the coast and the coast was no longer in sight, people from the bottom deck came up with guns on them, and they chained them. And the ship was called the ship Jesus. Jesus. Do you understand what I'm saying? Google this stuff. I mean, go to the Library of Congress, go research this stuff. And when they brought them here, which was irony and fate all smashing it at one time, the day that they brought him here was a day that you all celebrate. They brought him here not in 1619. It was in 1555. April 1st. What is April 1st? April Fool's Day. They fooled him and they brought him here. So this is a fun fact from history that John Hawkins and those medical centers that you see, those were named after him. The first slave trader, John Hopkins, was named John Hawkins. Okay, but anyway, but some of the records through the years and through the decades and were changed to John Hopkins. Okay, now let's go to so Ping One says U.S. congressmen are openly calling for Palestinian genocide. When you said that, I Googled something. I just put in these words. You can do this. I put in these words: congressmen said nuke Palestine, and what came up? The first article that came up was from the Times of Israel, right? And they did an article on U.S. Representative Tom Walberg, right? And he called for the nuking of Palestine. I'm gonna tell you how ignorant that is. Okay, if Israel lets nukes fly in Palestine, guess who dies? Not just the Palestinians, the Israelis too. Palestine is the size of New Jersey. Do you understand that? So to nuke occupied Palestine is to kill yourself. But this is what you get from these people. This shows me the lack of understanding and how they lack depth of knowledge when they're speaking. And these are elected representatives who are put in positions of stewardship to guide U.S. domestic and foreign policy. That shows you just how out of touch America is. All right. Now let me go. I'm gonna go back to that Chinese money and stuff. But first, I gotta highlight MJK. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you so much for the super sticker super chat. $10 super sticker. Thank you so much. I'm gonna leave that up there. I really appreciate that. So do you see the Chinese with this gold and with falsely lowering the expectation of the West on what they do have when pundits and everybody alike knows that they have tons and tons and tons of silver and gold? They're doing that for a reason. If you were not planning something, why would you hide the reality of your holdings? Why? It's because you're planning something. You know that America is not the Western. I shouldn't say just America. I'm saying the Western world is not fair and it's not just. Look at what they're doing to Americans right now. Forget China in the East right now. Look at what America is doing to Americans, and look at what the EU is doing to Europeans. They are causing them to become poor, homeless, hopeless, outraged, divided, all because they want to implement these insane policies. You will provide Ukraine with $61 billion, but you won't invest $20 billion to eradicate homelessness in America. You'll give Ukraine another $61 billion and Israel $20 billion, but you won't take 30 or 40 billion and eradicate poverty completely in the United States. You are giving Israel 20 billion. You're giving Ukraine 61 billion. You're giving Chinese Taipei 8 to 10 billion. But you don't see any reason to bail out students from student loans that they're trapped under. You don't see any good in investing in a good Head Start program for children. You don't see any good coming out and helping people pay their heating bills or their medical bills or help them with their mortgage or their rent. That's not good for you, even though you're using their money and borrowed money to give to these other people who live across the globe. That's America's thinking. Look at the European Union. They're making them people poor as dirt over there because they follow the United States lead and want to wage an economic war against Russia. First of all, I don't have to be a scientist, an educator, anybody but the average Joe, and common sense tells me that if Russia supplies 30% or 40% of my oil, and Russia supplies between 40 and 60% of my gas, and Russia supplies 40 and 60% of my fertilizer that I grow food with, and supply all of the tangible goods that is needed for the so-called individual European nations that make up a collective European Union to be prosperous. I need this from Russia. Why would I then sanction Russia, send weapons into a war zone that was artificially created by Brussels, Berlin, Paris, London, and Washington, D.C., and then try to embargo Russia? Oh, you can't fly your planes over our airspace. Hold on. But the Western nations have to fly over Russian airspace because Russia is almost 3 times the size of the United States. And it is cost effective to fly over Russian airspace when you have these airlines so that they can save on gas and on hours, because to go over Russia might shorten your trip by a day. But then you have to go all around. And now you're complaining to Congress and you're complaining to your European Parliament that this is unfair competition, that China's air carriers get to go over Russia. That's something that you made. This is what I'm telling you. When they do stuff, they never, ever expect it to boomerang, when common sense tells you that it can boomerang and then snowball out of control. And then when it snowballs out of control, what did Olaf Scholz say? Russia, cut off the gas. Russia, cut off the taps. No, you sanction Russian gas. You sanction Russian oil. You sanction Russian commodities. You sanction Russian fertilizer. So, listen, these people are crazy as hell. They are. Oh, I get some in here. Hold on 1 second. Okay. You're gonna come in. So you remember to discuss them. Okay. So I was saying something. I'm sorry. Something was going across the screen. I didn't know what that was from StreamYard and YouTube. So I had to read it. Well, listen, I've had more of your time than I should have today. But check this out. We have about, I think, 1 or 2 channel member streams coming up this week. And we have 1 or 2 Patreon streams coming up this week. I advise you all to come on over and join the platforms and tell others about the platform. And I'm doing my best. We're doing our best. My son does the graphics. My son does all of this other stuff. And also, I know, and I read your comments about Flying Crocodile, read your comments about the comment section being disabled. I couldn't do it. I didn't know what to do. So I talked to my son, and my son said he would look at it after the show or whatever. I had no idea because it was enabled by me. So if it was disabled, it wasn't by me. You know what I'm saying? Okay. All right. Now, what is going on here? They're free. Listen to me. Now a pink thing pops up on the screen now, and I'm talking to you all about all these facts. Now it goes away when I say anything about it. But listen, Flying Crocodile says all this lunacy makes sense once you accept the reality that the objective is to totally destroy all societies and bring everyone to the point where they will prostrate themselves to be saved. Oh, mic drop moment, boom. You know what? I was getting ready to say something that, man, let me highlight. MJK, I gotta highlight this. I gotta highlight this. Everybody, take a moment of silence and read this, what Flying Crocodile put up there. That's not a mic drop moment. I don't know what it is. And I don't think there's no better way to end the show than with something like that from you guys. It really shows me that you're informed, or you're getting informed. It shows me that you are not swallowing the spiked Kool-Aid that they're trying to make you drink. And it gives hope to the future that people are starting to grow mentally, and they're starting to really see through the lies and the propaganda of the propagandists and the liars who reside in the capitals of all of these Western nations. On that note, know that I love each and every one of you from the depths of my heart to the bottom of my soul. I love each and every one of you, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that the divine supreme being has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. We're out of here, and thank you again. Peace.